Hey, everybody, I'm Justin Young, and he is Josh Tech, and this is the Shot Clock, Georgia's high school basketball podcast that we run every single week right here on HoopSeen TV, right here on YouTube, or wherever you may find this amazing piece of video content. We appreciate you joining us. We're going to talk a lot about the Peach State today as we get closer and closer to the postseason, and the region tournaments are here. Before you know it, Josh Tech will be making his annual trek down to Macon, Georgia. Josh, you excited for that? You excited for the playoffs?
Yeah, there's no vacation spring break destination like Macon, Georgia, right? It's paradise that not many people. It's underrated. It's an underrated paradise.
It is actually, I think, really good for Atlanta hoop heads to get down to Macon, to get outside the comfort zone, to go see something new, and to get into a city that really is worth exploring. I think the Georgia Hall of Fame is pretty cool to get into, and then really, we've talked about the Macon Centralplex or whatever they're calling it these days is really one of the most interesting places that we can do to honor a season for high school players, no question about it. So we can have a whole podcast on that and all the best places to play.
I'm sure we will. That's actually a great idea. Awesome content, right? Best venues in Georgia to see basketball.
I almost took a right turn, so let's just jump right into it and do that. But I think we'll save that one. I think that one's a good idea that we will talk about. But in this show, we're going to talk about a quick early preview to region tournaments that you got to go see. We're going to do a deep dive into all the classifications and really determine whether or not there is a contender in each of these classifications. And judging by the win-loss record across the entire state of Georgia, I think I know where this podcast is going to go today. Just feels like there's going to be like a lot of shrugging of the shoulders before we honestly come to some sort of answers. But we do want to dive into it. It may be a little bit of a long pod. We may break this up into two, so you'll find out like we will find out as we go through it. But if you're here and you're watching, we appreciate that. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you can be notified every time we update. We do this every single Monday. So Monday or Tuesday, you'll find this Shot Clock pod talking about Georgia high school basketball. So Josh, let's just jump right into it. I've got a number of questions right above my head. So if you see me looking at it, we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff. So I want to make sure I get the information correct. But as we look ahead, usually there's always like a top dog, and you can kind of look at the national polls. You can see some years it's Norcross, and some years it's Wheeler, and some years it's Milton, some years it's Pebblebrook, some years it's McEachern, yada, 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 yada. Is there a definitive top dog across all classifications in the state of Georgia right now in the 2022-2023 season?
No, I don't think that there is that team that's like the national flag bearer right now. I don't think that if you look across national rankings, there is going to be a Georgia team in top 25 rankings. I think maybe closer to 30, 35, 40-ish range. But I do think that within certain classifications, obviously there are those top dogs that are, looking like unstoppable within their classifications, and maybe within the state, right? Maybe within the state there are some certain top dogs. But if we're talking from a national scale, a national perspective, I don't think that there are those, world beater teams this season.
From my impression, looking from the outside in, there's a lot of tiers, right? Like a lot of each classification, there's like 3 or 4 teams with each class.
Yeah.
That's that elite tier that can really be a contender, which I think we'll talk about a lot of those teams within these tiers throughout that. That being said, is there a team or two that seems to be surging at the right time as we get closer and closer to February and even into March?
Yeah, I think a team that's really kind of catching fire right now is Pebblebrook. I think, they've won their last 6 games, 5, 6, 7 games. On Saturday at the Nike Elite Showcase, they got a really great win over Norcross. It's a really quality win. And, before that, they had won several of their games, and now they're facing, region play, and they should be favored in most of those games as well. So I think Pebblebrook is a team that's catching fire at the right time.
Which is not a big surprise concerning the way that George Washington kind of builds his team. A lot of depth, a lot of toughness, and a lot of times it's a battle of attrition, as we see, even in the NBA with guys getting hurt in college games. We're in that same place where who can stay healthy and who's got the depth that you can keep throwing bodies at people to play aggressive, which we know Pebblebrook will play aggressive each and every time they play out. So let's dive into 7A. Let's start there, of course, with the biggest classification. And it seems like there's always a conversation between a very finite number of teams at the very top. Like we see a lot of
it's almost like the blue bloods of the state in a way.
Right, correct. Which the way they designed it, it kind of is, right, with the biggest schools that there are. So as we get into it, I think what we've got to do is really scale down before we scale up. And what I mean by that is let's take a look at the region tournaments, okay? And the way that the way the regions tournaments play out, that's how the state tournament is seeded, right? And so the region tournaments really do have a lot of impact on the postseason, the state tournament for the state of Georgia. So that being said, we've seen so many teams get prepared for the state tournament by a great region tournament. With that context in mind, which region tournament in 7A are you the most excited about, and who can really benefit the most from that type of run?
I think, well, this is the best region in all of Georgia, I think, for my money at least. It's 4-7A. That's got Grayson, Newton, Parkview, Archer, South Gwinnett, and Brookwood. All of those teams have had, good performances throughout the year against quality teams, right? I think at the top, obviously, Grayson and Newton are the two top teams in that. But then you look at a team like Parkview, who's got a lot of talent. You look at a team like Archer, who's always tough, and they've got talent. And then, South Gwinnett's been kind of like almost like a sleeper, right? They're a team that could really be a thorn in the side of somebody. And then you look at Brookwood, who's got a lot of, young talent, right? Brookwood's a younger team, and they're not a team that could be slept on either. They could easily pick off, one of these top teams.
So Grayson, Newton, Parkview, Archer, South Gwinnett, Brookwood. That's 6 teams. However, only 4 teams advance out of a region. So to your point, there's a lot of depth there. There could be for some upset opportunity, right? It depends on the seeding. And of course, we know that the region tournament, the way that it's seeded itself, really dictates a lot. But there's a game coming up this week between Newton and Grayson that may impact quite a bit as well. When is that game? Tuesday?
Tuesday, yeah. And they play again in early February, I believe. But yeah,
they Tuesday twice before the region tournament. Okay.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure every team in this region plays twice. So yeah, geez, man, what a murderer's row. Like, you've got to play all these teams home and away. Like, that's pretty tough.
They all play each other. They haven't played each other yet, is what you're saying?
Grayson and Newton haven't played each other yet, but everybody in this class or in this region plays each other twice home and away. So that's a lot of really high level iron sharpens iron kind of matchups throughout January.
Wow, Grayson and Newton. I mean, that in of itself is a game that's worthy of a Final Four, even a game worthy of Macon as well, which is possible again because you're coming out of the same region.
Yeah.
One gets seated over here, 2 gets seated over there. Where we've seen that before, where region foes play each other for a state championship too. So
I mean, we saw it last year, right? It was last year in 7A. Was it Berkmar and Norcross? I believe. And Norcross had lost three of those games to Berkmar throughout the regular season and the region playoffs, and then they ended up taking the one that counted at the end for the state playoffs. So we do see kind of those region matchups pretty often. The year before that was Kell and Wheeler when they were in the same 6A region. So you never know.
To me, not to get too far ahead of ourselves here, because we'll talk about it more next week on the show. I don't know if there's a better week in all of high school sports than that of the region tournaments for high school basketball in the Peach State. I love it. I learned so much about players. I learned so much about teams. It, to me, is the most opportunistic time to really learn about a dude who is a dude. Like, I was talking to my brother the other day, and Chris Paul's back with the Suns, right? I'm like, and they beat the brakes off of Memphis, who's a really good team, who's been playing really, really well. And, the Suns have been really hurt. They've been really injured. And he's like, man, you just got to have a dude. You just got to have a dude that can go out there and go get it done. I don't care how smart you are and what kind of plays you're in. You just got to go have a dude. And to me, these are the types of experiences and type of focuses that you can have on players to go figure out who's that dude.
Yep.
Who's that dude? Which to me, I think moving forward with our rankings, not that we haven't done that already, is that we're going to have who's that dude type of filter. Like, if it's an A versus B or A versus A, who are we picking? I think we have to run it through that filter of who's that dude that can go get the play, that can go get the shot, that's got the killer mentality, like Joe Burrow yesterday, right, with the Bengals. Who's that dude?
Is that a rhetorical question, or is that a question that you're actually asking me?
Yeah, I went a little coach on you there. That's probably more rhetorical.
Okay, because I wasn't prepared for that one. I was gonna say there's a lot of dudes actually, but yeah, no, I agree. It's the pressure situation. That pressure creates diamonds, right? So that's kind of. So I agree with you there. You got the Kemba Walker at UConn kind of player.
Sure.
Looking for. Yep.
Who can go get that shot? Is Steph Castle that guy in this Grayson Newton matchup?
Yeah, I mean, that's the guy I would circle in that one, right? I mean, he's arguably playing like a, Mr. Georgia basketball all player of the year, whatever kind of accolades you want to throw on him. He's playing on that level. He is certainly having himself a hell of a high school season going out to before he goes to UConn.
There was a story that you sent me off of 24/7 Sports that one, was it a college coach or a pro scout, said
It was NBA scouts.
yeah, said Steph Castle could be the number one guy out of this class, which
Yeah,
is interesting.
I think it was Adam Finkelstein who wrote that, and I was watching their version of this. They had a podcast with him and Travis Branham, and he said it's really interesting to me because of the Georgia focus. He said one guy said Isaiah Collier was number one, someone else said Justin Edwards, and then someone else said Stephon Castle. So it was like, he was talking to NBA scouts at the Hoop Hall, and two of the three names that were mentioned, prominently were Georgia guys. I think that's, we're really spoiled in 7A.
Falls in line with the brand, no question about it. Okay, in 7A, your gut says this XYZ team wins it all. Is there a team that fits that XYZ?
No, honestly, this 7A is so interesting because I can think about this and like second guess myself every single time I see a team, right? One day I could see a Wheeler and be like, yep, that's the team. The next day I could see Norcross and be like, yeah, they're probably going to win. The next day I could see Grayson and be like, yeah, I really like Grayson to win it all. So there's a tier of teams, maybe like 5 or 6 teams who I could reasonably see winning it all. And for me, like any of those matchups could end up being coin flip matchups. So the tier of teams, here's what I've got. I've got Wheeler, I've got Norcross, I've got Grayson, I've got Newton, I've got McEachern, and then two kind of outsider teams who I would kind of be, who could be making Final Four appearances, who could play spoiler to some of those teams, would be Milton and Pebblebrook. So I have like 7 teams or so who I'm like, yeah, I think that team could reasonably make a Final Four.
Yeah, I mean, if you follow Georgia high school basketball, those are the teams, right? Every year.
Yeah.
Those are the teams. I mean, those are the teams that you expect to be there. And like you said last year, I don't think a lot of people thought Norcross was going to be the favorite to win it all last year, but here they did. And again, the 7A playoffs in Georgia is really a battle of attrition. A lot of times it comes down to matchups. The way that we do our home court seating for the first 3 rounds is really important. Who's really healthy. And again, like who's surging at the right time. And those matchups are really, really critical to pay close attention to. So you said Wheeler, Norcross, Newton, Grayson, McEachern, with Milton and Pebblebrook being on that second tier as a team that can go take it all.
Yeah, I think Milton and Pebblebrook are two of they're not surprising teams because they are like, in that blue blood conversation, but they're, compared to recent years, their talent level hasn't been as high as it normally is, but they're still, they're proving that they still can beat anybody on any given night. Both those teams have had fantastic seasons. And so that's why I kind of put them right on that outside looking in kind of spot where they could, if they made a Final Four, I would not be surprised at all. And if either of those teams were playing in Macon, I still wouldn't be surprised.
I'm looking at the list and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, okay, who does not have a pro? Obviously, Wheeler's got pros. Norcross has pros. Newton's had a pro, Ashton Higgins. Has Grayson had a guy come out of their program make the NBA yet?
I don't know. You historically would be better off on that than I would, but they certainly have had a lot of guys having success at the high major level right now.
No question about that. Yeah, no question about that. Obviously, McEachern's had a couple guys make the pros. Pebblebrook obviously has had a couple guys make the pros. Milton.
I don't know if they have have had guys in the past, but they have a couple guys who are probably on their way.
Well, they have had Jordan Lloyd played at Milton and played in the pros. Yeah.
There we go. I rely on the guy with the history.
Yeah. And oh man, I'm totally drawing a blank. It's probably like one of those things that's like right in front of my face. I'm like, of course. I don't know what I think about that. Nevertheless, pretty fun to think about, right? When you think about 7A and really just how deep. And that's why I think 2 guys at the top 3. And then they mentioned the article from Georgia, which is not a big surprise for guys to stay at their high schools as well, too. So pretty cool. Let's pivot to 6A. The same question I think stays there. Is there anybody in your gut that you think is the team that wins it all?
Well, this is interesting because going into the season, I think everybody in the state, if you would have asked anybody, they would have been like, yeah, Grovetown's the favorite, and it's not probably not close. But Grovetown hasn't really had that kind of season. They've struggled a bit. While they're still, they're still a contender, right? I mean, they're kind of playing off the radar a little bit because they play out in the Augusta area, and and just being in Atlanta, it's navigating through traffic, it's tough to get around. So I think everybody in this Atlanta area kind of sticks locally, just for convenience sake. So they're over there doing their thing in their region, winning a lot of games. But when we did get to see them, they weren't performing at that level that we expected. But a team that was, projected on that top tier that has been living up to expectations has been Alexander. And they've only lost to one team in Georgia. They've lost 4 games total, and 3 of them have come to out-of-state teams. But in Georgia, their only loss is a 4-point loss to Grayson, who's in 7A, and obviously is a contender in that 7A that's loaded. So Alexander is a team that I'm kind of putting my chips in 6A right now.
Do you think? Let me walk it back real quick to Grovetown.
Okay.
Like, they did have a tough start, right? Now they've kind of gotten a region play. They're kind of finding their footing a little bit more. And we've seen this before. And I think when you look at Georgia, when you really kind of zoom out, man, these teams across the board, across all classifications, across all levels of talent, to the state's credit, they've all really leveled up and played really tough matchups outside of region, which I think gives a bit of a out of focus look to really how good the teams are. Because you may see a team with like 7 losses right now here at the end of January and go, oh, well, they've already lost 7 times. They're going to be X, Y, and Z. Yeah. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad team. It just means they played really, really good teams. Is Grovetown?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Is Grovetown one of those teams that could kind of fool you if you're just looking on the paper?
Yeah, certainly. A lot of their, I guess, struggles early on, if you want to call them that, or because they did play tough, really tough teams. Like, they had a stretch where they played McEachern, Wheeler, Columbus from Florida with the Boozers. So they weren't playing like cupcakes and losing to them. They were playing tough teams. So yeah, a lot of their losses do become, as a result of that. And then now it's just a matter of, all right, we made it through that stretch. We didn't get the record that we wanted to, or whatever. Now let's get right in region play and get ready for the tournament. And I do think that that's a team that I'm not discounting because they played that tough schedule. Yeah. And now they have a chance to get right. When you get into the 6As, when you're playing 6A teams, it's not going to be like, oh, well, there's no Boozers here. This isn't McEachern. This isn't Wheeler. Like, we can navigate our way through this and make it back to the Macon for the 6A state championship game.
Well, it certainly won't be easy. The one thing I do like about 6A, you've got a lot of teams that are really hungry, that are really, really tough.
Yeah.
You mentioned Alexander. Is there another team that maybe is in this short list for you?
Yeah, a team that I wrote about in the preseason as a team to look out for, but I wasn't quite sure how good they would be in the long run, is Jonesboro. They're 15-3, I think, and they've had a really sneaky good season. They may not be getting the love of an Alexander right now, or even the kind of attention that a Grovetown would be getting, or the kind of attention that an Etowah would be getting. But they're having a really great season. I think that team's athleticism and their toughness can really pay dividends in the end. When you get to a state tournament kind of atmosphere, that's a team that can really make a run.
I would never want to play Jonesboro in any postseason ever, no matter what.
Imagine playing at Jonesboro when they kind of got that building rocking and they kind of got all that momentum behind them. That sounds really intimidating. I'm not counting them out by any means.
If you are a Peach State hoop head, you've got to go down the borough and watch a game down there. That's one of the best places to watch a game. So much intensity. Really one of my most favorite places to go watch a game. So not surprised here that Jonesboro is on this list for you for 6A. Let's keep it moving in 5A. It seems like it's a 2-horse race, at least. And that's not to discount. That's not to disrespect everybody else. I don't want to be bulletin board material, which I'm sure we probably will. But those 2 teams in 5A that are the real contenders as of right now, at the end of January, are who?
Kell and Eagles Landing. I think if you gave anybody in the state truth serum, they'd be like, yeah, those are the 2 guys, and it's pretty much everybody else after that. I'm sure, they're, like you said, not to discredit anybody or to take shots at anybody, because that's not what we're doing. I think we're just giving that much credit to these 2 teams. I mean, the Eagles Landing 20-0, and Kell, I don't remember their record, but they played a national schedule and they've impressed pretty much everybody across the board in that regard, right? So I think they've only lost to Grayson and maybe one other team in Georgia. So they have the most talent, right? But Eagles Landing right now has been putting up a gaudy record, and they've been beating everybody on their schedule. So it's those 2 teams on a tier of their own. I think that we should be seeing those teams play in Macon. I don't know how the brackets will shake out, but if we if they get to be on the same side, I think we should have a power that switches them to be on opposite sides, so we can get that matchup in Macon and see who the real winner is of 5A.
I feel like both of these teams could be contenders in 6A for sure too.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Kell has been a contender in 6A as recently as last year and the year before.
Yeah, they moved down, right? Is that when they moved down his first year? Heck,
yeah,
for 7A too. Again, the way that these, those two teams, I think will be really good in that. It's not the region of doom. I don't want to steal away from your trademark region of doom. Which region was the region of doom, by the way?
We'll get there. That's an AD. It's
okay.
AAD1. Yeah.
We'll actually say that for part 2 because I think we are going to make a part 2 here shortly for these groups. But okay, so if I'm looking at it, here's who we've mentioned: Kell and Eagles Landing, Jonesboro, Alexander, Grovetown, Milton, Pebblebrook, McEachern, Grayson, Newton, Norcross, Wheeler.
Yes.
Of those teams, I mean, I would like to see that tournament in of itself.
Honestly, yeah. If you have that tournament, that is, and maybe include like a couple others from like the lower classifications. That's a hell of a tournament, regardless of classification, regardless of region. Like whoever wins that is going to be the state's best team.
I feel like we should do like New Jersey's Tournament of Champions, where you take the champions and the runners up and throw it in one giant tournament bracket.
Let's do that. That'd be great. HoopSeen, Georgia.
I've always said it. We'll host it. We can run it at Swanee Sports Academy. It would be amazing. It would truly.
That'd be incredible. Yeah.
I love it. Well, we've talked about 7A, 6A, 5A right here on the shot clock. I think it's a good place to pause. We'll take a quick little break. We'll come back with part 2 here of the shot clock as we forecast ahead to the region and state tournaments. Josh will be right back. Let's do it again. Let's take a little bit of a breather, and we'll come up with part 2 here in just a second.
Let's do it.